The day the rancher returned, the town gathered like iron filings to a magnet. Dust hung in the air, the courthouse bell stilled, and every whisper sharpened into a rumor. He rode in slow, hat low, eyes steady, the kind of calm that unsettles a crowd more than anger ever could. Folks paused mid-step, shop doors creaked open, and even the dogs seemed to sense something had shifted. They'd counted him out years ago, said he'd never recover from the fire, the loss, the quiet exile beyond the ridge where a man could disappear and be forgotten. Some claimed he'd fled in shame. Others said grief had hollowed him out. None of them expected him back, not like this. He dismounted without ceremony and tied his horse to the old post near the well. His boots hit the dirt with purpose, each step measured, as if he'd already walked this path 1,000 times in his mind. Faces turned, some curious, some wary, some pale with recognition. He didn't scan the crowd for approval. He didn't look for enemies. He walked straight to the center of the square, where the sun struck hardest, and removed his hat. When he spoke, it wasn't loud, but it carried. Years on the open land had taught him how to place his words so they traveled. He didn't accuse. He didn't shout. He told a story. Dates, numbers, signatures, facts stacked carefully, one atop another, until the truth stood tall and unshakable. He spoke of the fire that had taken his ranch, of how the flames moved too fast, of how certain boundaries had been shifted just weeks before. He named the men who'd signed the papers and the pockets those signatures had filled. A murmur swelled. The mayor's confident smile thinned, then cracked. Someone laughed nervously. Another swore under their breath. When the rancher reached into his saddlebag and produced the ledger, the sound it made hitting the table was like a gavel. Pages were turned. Ink didn't lie. The air seemed to tighten as if the town itself were holding its breath. She stood near the edge of the crowd, fingers clenched around the strap of her bag, heart pounding so hard it felt audible. She remembered the night of the fire, remembered watching the glow on the horizon, remembered how he'd left without looking back. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. Leaving hadn't been surrender. It had been preparation. As the truth unfolded, people stepped back as though space might protect them from it. Land that had been stolen would be returned. Names once spoken with respect now tasted bitter. And when the rancher finally paused, his gaze lifted, not searching, just steady, and found her. The weight of the moment settled fully in her chest. It wasn't triumph she saw in him. It was resolve, forged quietly over years. Her breath caught. Emotion surged. Relief, awe, gratitude, something deeper she couldn't yet name. She pressed a hand to her chest, tears blurring the sunlit square, and whispered to no one and everyone at once. That feeling, it was amazing. By sundown, the square no longer felt like the same place. The dust had settled, and with it the years of quiet fear that had lived between the buildings. People moved differently now, slower, thoughtful, as if every step carried new weight. Conversations sparked in low, urgent tones, not with gossip but with reckoning. The rancher stood apart from it all, sleeves rolled, calm as ever, while the officials scrambled to contain what could no longer be hidden. He didn't linger near the table where the ledger lay open. Justice, once released, could walk on its own. Instead, he crossed the street to where Mrs. Calder's gate sagged on one hinge. Without a word, he set it right, hammer tapping in a steady rhythm that felt almost ceremonial. The sound drew people's eyes more than the earlier shouting had. A man who fixed what was broken without asking to be seen, that was harder to ignore than any speech. She found him there, the courage to approach arriving only after she'd watched him help a child lift a fallen crate and tip his hat to an old hand who'd once turned away from him. When she spoke his name, it felt strange and familiar all at once. Words rushed out. How she'd doubted, how she'd hoped, how she hadn't known whether to believe the rumors or the silence he left behind. He listened without interrupting, the way the land listens to rain. He told her he hadn't come back for revenge. Anger burned hot but brief, he said, and he'd learned patience where the hills met the sky. Out there, he'd worked, learned, gathered proof the way a rancher gathers cattle, slowly, carefully, never forcing the herd. He'd waited until the truth could stand on its own legs. I only wanted things set right, he said, voice quiet. For everyone. As the sun slid low, the horizon flared gold and copper. Townsfolk began to drift home, changed but unsure how to name it. Some offered thanks, some avoided his eyes. He accepted both with the same steady grace. When his horse stamped and tossed its head, he mounted, the saddle creaking like an old friend welcoming him back. She walked beside him to the edge of the road, the weight of unspoken things humming between them. She realized the shock wasn't just that he'd exposed the truth, it was how he'd done it without cruelty, without pride. Strength, she saw now, didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived quietly and left a place better than it found it. He tipped his hat, a small smile breaking through at last, and turned toward the open land. As he rode away, the town exhaled, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. She stood there long after the dust settled, knowing that some returns didn't close a chapter. They opened a future, one built on honesty, courage, and the astonishing power of doing what was right.